Due to WWE superstars being on the road virtually 300 days a year, they build close bonds with each other, and these friendships become bigger than the wrestling business itself. The friendship in question is ultimately built on their mutual love and respect for the world of pro wrestling, but sometimes this is why the friendship ultimately breaks down. Over the years, there have been a number of sad tales of once great friends falling out, and there's been no clear signs of possible reconciliation. Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at 10 WWE real-life friendships that broke down. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Number 10. CM Punk and Hornswoggle. It's well documented that CM Punk had a close friendship with Colt Cabana, which sadly broke down after the two had to battle a WWE doctor in court. But during Punk's time in WWE, his closest friend was actually Hornswoggle. The two former WWE stars managed to get on really well for a number of years, and the two would eventually become traveling partners. The friendship though fell apart once Punk left WWE, as according to Hornswoggle, Punk decided to cut the friendship off after being asked by Hornswoggle for the phone number of a mutual friend. This perhaps seems one of the most ridiculous reasons someone can cut off a friendship, and Hornswoggle is still baffled by Punk's decision. Number 9. Randy Orton and Mr. Kennedy. Now, fans are fully aware that Randy Orton and Mr. Kennedy aren't the biggest fans of one another, and whilst this is true, this wasn't always the case. Before Kennedy was fired from WWE in 2009, the two were close friends, and Kennedy was said to be someone that Orton confided in backstage. But this all changed when Kennedy was reckless with a backdrop, which Orton claimed could have resulted in him suffering a career-ending injury. But instead of talking to Kennedy directly about the issue, Orton complained to Vince McMahon and was even supported by John Cena. Vince made the drastic decision to fire Kennedy, and Kennedy has never been seen since in a WWE ring. Now, according to Kennedy, the two men did eventually talk in 2020 for around 30 minutes, and they claimed that everything was good between the two men. Hopefully this is true, but this wasn't an issue that needed to take over a decade to rectify. Number 8. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Hardcore Holly. When Stone Cold Steve Austin burst onto the WWE scene in 1996, he traveled with two WWE superstars. One was Billy Gunn and the other was Bob Holly. According to Holly, he and Austin built up a strong bond, and he claimed that the two would become great friends as they continued to grow in the company. However, this all changed when Austin became one of the biggest stars in the entire WWE. Around 1997, Austin's popularity soared, and according to Holly, Austin's ego grew substantially around this time period. Holly claims that the friendship between the two broke down after Austin wanted nothing to do with those he used to be associated with. And whilst this may be the case with Holly, a number of stars who were friends with Austin during his early days in pro wrestling, names such as Kevin Nash, William Regal and Jim Ross, all maintained close personal bonds with Austin as he went on to superstardom. Number 7. AJ Styles and Paul Heyman. Now, the friendship between AJ Styles and Paul Heyman was built on mutual respect. That was until a real-life incident changed everything. Styles and Heyman had a close working relationship, and Heyman was heavily involved in a lot of Styles' promo and character work. Sadly, this friendship was completely destroyed in 2020 after Styles' good friends Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows were released by WWE. Styles believed that Heyman had something to do with this release, and he said that he will never trust anything Heyman says ever again. Now, things are so heated between the two former friends that WWE tries to keep them on separate shows in order to keep both men happy. Number 6. Arn Anderson and Ric Flair. Considered by many to be two of the most influential wrestlers of all time, Arn Anderson and Ric Flair are synonymous with each other, mainly due to their involvement in the iconic Four Horsemen stable. For decades, fans assumed that the two were inseparable, but something has changed in their dynamic over the past few years. According to Flair, the two don't speak, and he's unsure what's gone wrong. Flair claims that Arn never called him when he was sick or when his son passed away. It's clear that Arn doesn't want anything to do with Flair, and it'll be interesting to hear Arn's take on the event. Number 5. Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. Now, the friendship between Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch was one of the most wholesome friendships in the entire WWE. They were always hanging out, and the two seemed destined to be best friends forever. However, in 2021, it was reported that the two were no longer friends and the friendship is non-existent. This all surfaced after a segment took place on SmackDown which was supposed to feature the two swapping their respective women's titles. Instead, Charlotte went off script to try and make Becky look foolish, and that was when reports came out surrounding the nature of their friendship. A heated backstage confrontation followed, and at one point it actually looked like it was gonna get physical. The two women have been asked a dozen times over the past few months why the friendship broke down, and both managed to give a kayfabe answer. However, Becky's answer on the MMA Hour is perhaps the most accurate and revealing. She revealed, "My star was rising. We were the best of friends. It all worked when she was on top and I was below. We could all see the way things were going in 2019 and people were really rallying behind me, and this term would put me in a different league. And I don't think she could take that and hasn't been able to take it. I think it's affected her work, even now. She is potentially one of the greatest, but I'm so in her head that she's lost it a bit and has lost a step. She's got that jealousy and that little devil on her shoulder." Number 4. CM Punk and Corey Graves. CM Punk and Corey Graves were great friends for over a decade, but that was until Punk infamously left the WWE back in 2014. According to Graves, he and Punk drifted apart once Punk left the company, and it was like Punk wanted no part of his former life. Following Punk's loss at UFC 225 in 2018, Graves took to Twitter to reference the former friendship and tweeted, "Maybe abandoning everyone who stood by your side, even when we weren't supposed to, only to have to turn your back on us wasn't the right move after all. No anger, only sadness." It's obvious that Graves was hurting from Punk cutting him off, and hopefully now Punk is back in the wrestling world, albeit in AEW, the two can amend their friendship. Number 3. Raven and Shane McMahon. When Raven first signed with WWE in 1993 as Johnny Polo, he formed an instant bond with Shane McMahon. Befriending the WWE chairman's son is either going to go really well or really badly, and unfortunately for Raven, it didn't have the best results. According to Raven, he and Shane would go out every single night, which resulted in Raven receiving monumental heat with not just Vince McMahon, but also with Linda McMahon. Raven claims that it killed his career, and when he returned to WWE in 2000, Vince and Linda still had a lot of reservations about him due to his antics with their son. The two drifted apart, and no doubt Vince and Linda had a big influence on this occurring. Number 2. Scotty 2 Hotty and Rikishi. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, and sometimes friendships can be healed, and this was the case with Scotty 2 Hotty and Rikishi. The two were a part of Too Cool during the Attitude Era, but it was believed that the two had a personal falling out in 2015. When Rikishi was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Rikishi didn't mention Too Cool in his induction speech, and Scotty felt like this was incredibly disrespectful. Scotty would make a number of negative comments about Rikishi on social media, and it appeared as if the friendship was officially over. But 6 years after their apparent falling out, Scotty took to Twitter to share an image of the two hanging out, so it looks like at long last the former tag team champions are back on good terms. And number 1, Triple H and Ric Flair. And when Ric Flair rejoined WWE in 2002, he became incredibly close with someone who had admired him throughout his entire career. That individual was Triple H. Flair and Triple H began to talk about the world of pro wrestling, and they would hang out socially. This friendship blossomed, and the two would eventually create Evolution, one of the most successful stables in WWE history. When Flair retired from WWE in 2018, he chose Triple H to induct him, and would even label him as his best friend. However, in 2022, Ric Flair revealed that the two no longer speak, and he's unsure what Triple H's issue is. It was reported in 2021 that Triple H had suffered a cardiac event, so it's clear that Triple H has an awful lot to deal with, and it should have been Flair who should have been reaching out to the game. But there you have it, folks, 10 WWE real life friendships that broke down. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.